Thanks for staying on. We continue with your reporting now here on your daytime update. The city of Cape Town has won a court order to relocate refugees. Western Cape High Court acting Judge Daniel Thulare has ordered the removal of refugees and asylum seekers from the Central Methodist Church in Cape Town. The group was offered refuge in the Central Methodist Church after they were evicted from outside the UN High Commission for Refugees offices in St. George's Mall last October. This follows a tension between refugees and police resulting in violence. Subsequent efforts to convince the refugees to move were unsuccessful, prompting the municipality to resort to court action. Now, let's cross on live to our reporter Athi Mthongana, who's outside the courtroom. It's been a battle, Athi, since last year, October at least, and finally the municipality getting this court order. What does the court order actually mean?
Well, Thabo, we sit inside the Western Cape High Court where acting Judge Daniel Thulare read out the judgment for about an hour. He began by obviously giving us history of foreign nationals in South Africa, their arrival in South Africa, and how they have really been staying in South Africa, and how their stay has been in the country over the past few years, and how government has dealt with their stay in the country, and how the courts, the justice system has dealt with their stay in the country. But eventually he got to the point where everybody was waiting for, which everybody was anticipating inside the courtroom, where he read out essentially saying that this interim court order has been granted with a lot of conditions. And like I said to you, Thabo, the judgment was about an hour long. In fact, we are still having copies made for members of the media to dissect and look at what exactly the judgment says in detail. But of course, what we know now is that that interim court order has been granted. So the city of Cape Town now has 7 days, of course, from today. That order comes into effect for at least the next 7 days. For the city of Cape Town to remove those that are surrounding the Central Methodist Church. Remember, Thabo, you have refugees that ran inside the church, and then you have an outpouring number of those who are also outside the Central Methodist Church, those that are actually in breach of the city's bylaws. So remember, all those that are camping outside, about 300 of them are sleeping outside. They've erected tents outside. Ablution processes are taking place outside. We know that cooking is taking place outside. Bathing is taking place outside. So all these contraventions to the city's bylaws have really upset not only the municipality, but the general public and businesses around Green Market Square. And so now the city of Cape Town has permission by the Western Cape High Court to, of course, remove those that are outside the church, those that are in breach of the city's bylaws. And just a few minutes ago, we spoke, of course, to JP Baulos. He's one of the leaders of the camp of the two groups which have been divided into two camps. So JP's leading another camp of the refugees and asylum seekers, and then you have Papi Sukami, who's also leading the other part, or the other group of the refugees and asylum seekers. And of course, both leaders have expressed disappointment. In fact, JP Baulos coming out to say he's not surprised, that he was actually anticipating that a judgment of this nature would come out today. But another interesting thing that the acting judge read out, saying that JP Baulos and Papi Sukami have been misleading the people that they are representing, saying that they have taken advantage of the xenophobic attacks that have been happening in South Africa. Now, if you remember, last year there was a spike of xenophobic attacks, but not in Cape Town. And so the judge was essentially saying that what the two leaders have done, have taken advantage of what has been happening in other parts of the country in relation to xenophobia, and used it here to be able to continue to want and demand for the UNHCR to move them outside of South Africa and move them elsewhere, claiming that they are no longer safe in these borders.
Well, since then, Athi, we know that the Home Affairs Department has responded by saying they can't force other countries to take the refugees coming from the Central Methodist Church. Have we heard anything from the Home Affairs Department today following this judgment?
Not yet. Of course, all parties involved are now looking at that judgment, dissecting it and trying to understand it in detail. So really what the Department of Home Affairs, through the Minister of Home Affairs, Athi, has said is that their hands are tied, that there is nothing that they can do at this point in time. Remember, there were also a lot of talks and a lot of meetings and a lot of engagements that transpired in the days leading to today. And of course, last year as well, when all of this started happening, there were several meetings between the city of Cape Town, the refugees, the Department of Home Affairs, as well as the police. And so all of those engagements, Thabo, have not resulted into anything tangible, because essentially what refugees and the rest of the people in the public really want to know is where these refugees and asylum seekers will be moved to. And so those meetings were essentially set up to have that part or have that element resolved. And I can tell you till today, Thabo, they haven't found alternative accommodation, and the Department of Home Affairs at some point was supposed to process every single refugee and asylum seeker that's there, but of course coming out to say that they won't be able to do it while they're still occupying the Central Methodist Church, waiting for that alternative accommodation space to be found, which has yet to be found, Thabo. And another interesting thing that a lot of the refugees were asking us as members of the media is where they'll be moved to now, because at least we know through the judgment that they will be provided with free transportation to wherever they need to be at this point in time. We understand that there is an assessment center which they will then be assessed and processed in terms of their papers by the Department of Home Affairs. And there are talks that that assessment center might be in Salt River. But then, of course, all of those details will be shared by the city of Cape Town, which now has won its bid to have the refugees and asylum seekers removed around the Central Methodist Church, where they have been in breach of the city's bylaws.